Okay, so now in this episode, I'm gonna talk a little bit about Grandmaster Perkins. I just want you to understand though, what I'm telling you and what I'm gonna show in these episodes, and I'll just keep doing this stuff as stuff comes to mind because the truth is he was so creative and there were so many things he could do. It's unbelievable. You know, one of the things about John, as we called him, I used to call him my master, and people say, "Why do you call John your master?" I said, "Well, I actually used to do it because he didn't like me saying that to him, so I would do it because it's like the Marine Corps. If you don't want to be called something, the more you fight against it, the more you get called it. So I was called my master because of the fact that I know he didn't like it. But when he moved, first of all, he was an enigma in everything he did. You know, it reminds me of stories of the legendary Hu Yun-jai, who used to teach an art and practice an art called Mizhong-yi. And basically it's the Lambertine art, as they called it, where it just seemed to change constantly, where you couldn't build a defense against it because you never knew where it was coming from. So I kind of like making that comparison. But the other thing was about John. John was really closer to how Miyamoto Musashi was. If you read the Book of Five Rings and you look into Warrior Flow, which is, an extract of the art John created, really, Kishwando or God Chaos, and things. I was, senior master instructor in the system, helping write a book, so I know what I'm talking about. Everything that Musashi talked about, John was actually doing. And so one of the things that was separated John from Tim always liked when he worked with you to have a little contact. And you got to have contact or else there's no fight. But contact is a relative thing. And I can go down a deep rabbit hole on this. With John, contact didn't start here. Contact started even before he even touched you. And the reason is, he used to talk about this thing called spatial awareness. And what spatial awareness really is this kind of visceral sense that we all have as human beings, where we can feel another person's presence or even objects within proximity of our body. Really cool thing we do as humans. Well, John had figured out how to use that. I don't know how he did it. It doesn't matter. He could do it. And what he would do is, he wouldn't wait to get here to make contact with you before he would make a decision in his body, because he already knew kind of the pattern of your movement and how he was tracking you visually, how your body was aligned. He would start making the decisions before he even touched. This is the reason why John would touch your hands and he would be talking and start moving, and you're like, have no idea what's going on because you feel something, you see him moving, yet at the same time, you can't track what he's doing. Absolutely amazing ability. And a part of that, I believe, because I know I'm right, is because of the fact that John didn't have a long reach. John was like 5'8". He didn't have a long reach. Now he knew how to elongate his body and do stuff, which was brilliant stuff. And so unlike Tim, John really couldn't play with people out here if he wanted to hit them because it's just physics. What he would do is he would use his sensitivity to feel the relationship between your body and his body, and he would change his body in a way where as he moved in on you, he was not just getting offline. He was changing the attitude of his body because he knew he needed to get close to you. So the other thing he would do is he would have this very light touch. Sometimes when you were working with John, especially in close, his body had a very liquid-like feel to it. It was really weird, whereas no matter what you did, no matter where you pushed, no matter how you grabbed him, it felt like you're like fighting like a bunch of anacondas, and every time you did something, you got punished for it because he was there, then he was not there. Absolutely amazing ability. And so the things he would do in here, he kind of played this game of going into different states within his body. Tim did the same thing too, but Tim preferred, like I said, to have a little more contact, but also Tim liked to use a little more strength. Tim used to always talk about strength being good, and I recommend anybody who does any kind of martial art, I don't care what it is you do, if you're not thinking about developing your body and improving your strength and agility and endurance, you're selling yourself short because there's no magic to how this stuff works. At some point, you got to do something with your body. I'm sorry, but unless you're going into the fight with your astral body or some nonsense, you got to bring your body, so you got to develop your body. So Tim and John, where the seemingly contradictory ways in which they did flow came in is because, and this is an important point, they did what they did based on the composition of their bodies and what their bodies were capable of doing. So for example, John didn't have reach because he was only 5'8", against many people who he went up against, like myself and some others who were much bigger or much taller. So he would always have to find ways to slip past people, get off line in the initial movement of their movement, because otherwise he'd get hit. So he was always collapsing in on people, getting offline, changing the attitude of his body, slipping around people's bodies. He used to use a concept called unavailable, unavoidable. And it's a good concept. In Warrior Flow, we kind of changed it a little only because words have meaning. And that is, we just say evade and strike. It's the same concept. The difference is evade and strike means, no, evade first and strike. Unavailable, unavoidable, one of the problems was, at least I had to correct it numerous times to people, is people always assumed you did both at the same time, and it's just not possible. The reason is, if I'm trying to be unavailable and unavoidable at the same time, I tend to start getting stuck in between, kind of in a no man's land, because I'm trying to do two things simultaneously when the most important one is to get out of the way. Right? If you get out of the way and you move your body first, whatever you do with your hands can always catch up. But you can't do it the other way around. So it's always, if you're going to do unavailable, unavoidable, if you want to stick with that terminology, that's fine. But it's evade and strike. Unavailable first, unavoidable. Evade first, strike. It doesn't matter. So as he would do that, becoming unavailable, unavoidable, what he was doing was getting out of the way, positioning himself at a point, what we call the future, and then he was just hitting you. And this is the reason why when he would move in on people, it would have an overwhelming feel. The other thing was, when he moved in on you like that, especially when he's using speed, where he would be here, and all of a sudden he's in, because he was a master, or grandmaster, obviously, of pushing from the root and decelerating his mass in a microsecond. It literally felt like he was teleporting from one place to the other. It was an unbelievable thing he would do. Sometimes I'd be working with him, and he would be in a position, and he would all of a sudden be here, and I'd be getting kicked, and I'm like, what the hell's going on? But if you paid attention to what he was actually doing, not crap that people think he was doing, but what he was actually doing, you would see, and Tim used to point this out to me, you would see him load up on that leg he was going to push off of, and he would push hard, and he would land and decelerate, and he was already in position, lined up, whether he was going to kick, whether he was going to change direction and punch, whatever he was going to do. And then when you start adding the dropping that he did, forget it, you almost had no chance. And the reason was because everything was happening so fast and you become so disoriented by the time you respond to it. It's already too late, you almost got your face punched in. So he had all of these different abilities. I can go on and on for days on stuff he used to do. And like I said, as I build on these videos, I'll add more and more stuff. But the point is, the dichotomy between John and Tim and how they did things, and this is important, they both were still doing the same things within the same parameters of what humans can do, but they were just kind of operating on different ends of the spectrum. You know, John could be very light, like vapor or liquidy, but he could also be very rigid, like stone, if he needed to stop you. He never pushed you away. He just broke your balance and just didn't let you go where you wanted to go, or he would just move to a position where you just couldn't move. Tim actually started on the opposite end, where he would restrict what you could do. But if he needed to kind of become liquid or kind of ghost-like, he could. Tim would start here. If he needed to become this, he could. John started here, but if he needed to become this, he could. And they would both go in and out of this thing. And again, what you got to understand is that was actually a function of how their bodies were, how their bodies moved. And so you just got to keep that in mind, because everybody's body is a little different. Everybody has their own idiosyncrasies of things they like to do. But a lot of that is actually influenced by the fact that if you're using the principles right, that John came up with, and him working with Tim came up with, if you understand the principles, you realize, because we're all slightly different, we're all going to have little things that we do very well for whatever reason, because it's just the way our bodies are.